think. This
hmm
particular program was run in the capital area of Denmark, so all around Copenhagen. And they deliberately tried to compare normal screening program versus AI assisted screening program. The AI that they've utilized in this scenario is both screening and also decision support. And they've taken what was a screening program where you would normally have a scan, and that scan would be read by two radiologists. Now it's read by one radiologist if it's low risk, and by two radiologists if it's deemed, medium to high risk.
I think there's similarities with the Australian program where we do mammograms on the population. Breast screen SA or Breast Screen Australia do provide that service. In Australia, they're usually double read.
Welcome to MIAI, the podcast about medical imaging and artificial intelligence. Sit down with the most brilliant voices in radiology and AI to discover how technology is reshaping healthcare delivery today.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Medical Imaging AI. That's where we review all the latest and best information around radiology and AI specifically. Chi Chong is here with me. Hi, Chi.
Hello, Stephen.
Hi, good to talk again. My name is Stephen Peck. We are co-hosts of MIAI, and today we've got a really exciting topic. It's something I've been looking forward to doing ever since we started this podcast, which is delving into real-life examples of radiology AI, where it's working, where it's not, where it could potentially make a difference, where it could potentially go on to become something more, if it's the start of something that could lead to AI really being picked up. I see enormous value in AI, as it does Chi, which is why we're having this discussion, but we need to be realistic about where it makes a difference and where it doesn't, and work from there. So today I've got a couple of examples that I've found of real life activity. Chi's going to interrogate me with them and see if he can find some holes or see if we can work through them. And Chi's going to do the same. So we've got two each. I think it's time to roll straight in. What do you think, Chi?
I think let's start rolling.
Mine is actually really interesting, I think, and probably one of the best use cases of real success. And that's in Denmark, where they've been doing a little bit of work with AI for a number of areas. In fact, I found a few use cases for Northern Europe of it really being taken up. This specifically is about mammography. So finding cancers in breasts, obviously half the population. It's a pretty big use case. And if you're doing a screening program, that means it's a lot of work. A lot of work to try and find all the people over a certain age, screen them, make sure that they're not coming up against what is one of the highest killers of humans these days, especially obviously in older age. So there's a screening program. The current situation is that they scan everybody from age 50 to 69, I think. This particular program was run in the capital area of Denmark, so all around Copenhagen. And they deliberately tried to compare normal screening program versus AI assisted screening program. The AI that they've utilized in this scenario is both screening and also decision support. So there's two parts of what they've done in this, what they're using in this use case. And they've taken what was a screening program where you would normally have a scan, and that scan would be read by two radiologists. Now it's read by one radiologist if it's low risk, and by two radiologists if it's deemed, medium to high risk. So they've got the same level of process as before. You've still got double checks, and obviously anything that's found to be high, a reasonable level of risk is still read by two. But there's huge efficiencies in making it only be read by one if it's found as low risk. And obviously, how is it being identified as low risk? It's being looked at by AI to start with. The reason this is so exciting for me is it's a real life use case where we're reducing work, and radiologists aren't easy to find. There's already a need for more radiologists in the industry. And this is reducing that need, but guess what? The results are better. It's not just okay with less work, it's better with less work. So I'll read through some of those in a minute, specifically in terms of detection and in terms of where they're detecting, but it's better, Chi. How can you find a better example of lower cost, and better results in the industry. I think this is a great one. I'll go into more detail in a minute, but I just wanted to let you talk first.
Stephen, I think there's similarities with the Australian program where we do mammograms on the population. Breast Screening SA or Breast Screen Australia do provide that service. In Australia, they're usually double read. So by double reading for the viewers at home or listeners at home, that means you have one radiologist reports it and another radiologist reports it separately without knowing how it was graded from the original radiologist. After that, if there's a discrepancy, a third radiologist will report it and decide whether it's appropriate or not. So I guess it's what we're talking about in the Denmark program will be replacing probably one of those radiologists with a computer AI. Look, if it is what you're saying it is, improved accuracy, cheaper, let me hear more, Stephen. Convince me.
Well, let's go through that because I think you've got a number of years of studying this stuff where you might be able to add a little bit of value. Here are the stats, Chi. Cancer detection rate was improved. So out of 10,000 women screened, we found 12 more cancers for each of those 10,000. So that's 0.82% with AI versus 0.7 without AI. Off the top of my head, that sounds like 1/6 or a bit less than 1/6. That's pretty good. False positives and recalls were decreased. So false positive rates went down to 1.63 versus 2.39%. Again, that's a quarter reduction or even more than a quarter. Workload, they save 33% of the work for radiologists. They're still triaging. Remember, when they triage, they give it only to one radiologist when it's a low risk. They're still going to two radiologists when it's a reasonable risk. So that's a 33% reduction overall, but 66% of scans were only sent to one radiologist, as I understand it. Yeah, 66% were single read and 33 were double read. And there is a positive predictive value improvement. So as I understand it, that's the connection between a positive scan and actual disease. So just because you get a positive scan doesn't mean you actually really, really, really have the disease. There's probably a strong correlation, but it's not 100%. So that positive predictive value went from 33.5 with AI versus 22.5 without AI. All of those are reasonably big improvements, but there's one more I want to add. Not only were they finding more cancers with lower false positives, less work, and a higher positive productive value, but they found cancers that were smaller. So when they found the smaller cancers, rather than the bigger cancers that you would normally find, they had a better chance of survival and a better chance of treatment with less work. What do you think?
Sounds great. What happens if AI gets it wrong?
What happens if people get it wrong? This is showing that it gets it wrong less often. There's less false positives. There's more positive positives. Is that what you say? Positive positives. It gets it right more often. And there's a stronger correlation between positive scan and actual disease. So yeah, it can. And I mean, and this is a big issue with AI.
Yes, it is.
That the big issue is that you would ask that question because you don't ask that question when there's a human doing it. Like when there's a human doing it, you say, oh, well, they're doing the best they can. I'm sure they're using the best practice. We trust the mechanism. But the fact that you're asking it when I've just given you stats that it's better means you're saying, oh, but it's AI. What about it? You know, what if it's wrong? There's still that issue of trust. And I would have it as well, just like you did then. We're in the space. We still have the issue of trust. So I think that this is not that I want to hear your point, but in this case, I think this is a great example of where AI takes us forward on that trust ladder, if you will, by scenarios like this, utilizing AI really well means that we'll start to trust it more and allow it into more places. This is the first step to hopefully more areas where we'll be able to, as a society, have an increased trust.
It's a valid point. I think at the end of the day, it's a triage tool that isn't affecting the result in the sense that it's still a human that reads it at the end of the day. It just decides whether you should send 2 radiologists versus 1. If all the studies were originally double read, so to speak, in the first place, instead of single read, I'm just trying to work out in my head, Stephen, how that has improved the results. Because we moved from 2 radiologists at all time to 2 radiologists 1/3 of the time and single radiologists 2/3 of the time. How has that improved results?
Well, like I said, it's less work and higher detection and lower false positives. So I can't see on the surface of it, and there's some other caveats we can go through in a sec, but on the surface of it, it's all good. Like all the results here are good. And it's a better utilization. Just like if you got a expert radiologist come in to your hospital, you're not going to say, oh, well, we had the old radiologist who moved on and now we've got another one. And, what about the problems between the two? It's a better radiologist to come. So you're happy, right? In this case, it's a better outcome. So I know something's changed, but I think this is normal human progress.
Look, it sounds exciting place to be in. I think obviously there's population level data, which lends credibility to the research. I think it's something that more countries need to investigate, Stephen. Good find.
Talking about that, I wanted to give some caveats here for people who are listening so they understand more. This was across 66. Let me get the details for you. 60,000 women were screened without AI, and they compared it to 58,000 people screened with AI. And they followed people for 180 days afterwards. So it's not just, hey, we took basic information and we compared it without any real depth. This has gone reasonably deep. Well, this is really interesting. Human radiologists get to use past mammograms when they look at and to try and determine. The AI didn't. The AI only used what it had in front of it. So it almost had one hand tied behind its back and still was better in terms of the program was better. I'm not saying it's better than humans in every case. I'm saying the program as a whole, utilizing it as a screening program, it didn't get to look at that. Whereas, like I said, radiologists did. Now, you brought up a point before around it being done differently in different countries. That is a consideration. So in a lot of Europe, there are double screening programs, 2 radiologists screen. I know in the US, in a lot of places, they do a similar screening program, but only 1 radiologist reviews it. Okay. So you can't use triage. Well, maybe you can, but it's a 0 or 1 rather than a 2 or 1 scenario if you only have 1 screening. So if you're going to reduce it in the US, then it's gone from 1 every time to 0 sometimes and 1 every time. So this saving is obviously more useful when you've got a higher standard of a double read. And it's also important to point here that it wasn't just triage, it was also decision support. So after it was triaged, then the radiologist who was reviewing had calcifications or marks that are found on the scan circled or highlighted and pointed out, so they were able to be I guess more efficient in what they were doing, and most importantly more effective as well. So they were both parts.
Just out of curiosity, were the double readers, did they know they were being set up for a double read, or was it just blind that they didn't know whether this was a 2-read study or a single read study?
Are you saying the patient or the radiologist?
The radiologist reporting it.
That's a really good question. I would imagine, as with all scientific programs, scientific research like this, there should be no real knowledge. Otherwise, if you knew I'm the only single one, you might look at it. I'm a single read, you might look at it more carefully. If you knew you were a double read, you might look at it less carefully. I would imagine, and I'll look that up after this, I would imagine nobody knew anything. You just look at a scan, you're told to review it, gives you the best answer. I mean, in your job every day, you're not told if somebody else is going to review it again.
No, agree. No.
You just
do the best you can.
Exactly. So that's how I understand it anyway. Any more questions?
No, I think it's exciting times. I think we need to keep looking at these examples where it's better for the patient, saves money for the government, or saves money for the patient, and reduces workload fatigue in the radiologist. Like I said, good find, Stephen. Good find.
Good. I'm interested to hear yours, Chi. Hit me with yours.
So, Stephen, I've been thinking about radiology and what's out there at this moment in time, and I think, look, there's something to help us along each step. So let's start at the beginning. As a diagnostic radiologist, there's the list to report. So first thing I do to report something is I try to find a case that I can do. What do you think about that?
Yeah, there's smart lists. The AI can help you make order and prioritize the next job to take.
Correct. After you open up the case as a radiologist, you kind of set the images in the way that you prefer and the way you like it.
Yeah, for your productivity to make sure
for
it
your
makes it
productivity.
effective for you to be able to.
There's products already that do that. That's been there for many years before AI.
Yeah, not really AI. It's just
No.
in productivity improvement. Okay.
Yeah. So after that, as a radiologist, you look at the images, and then you try and interpret it. And there's lots of products out there. Do you know of any, Stephen?
There's lots of products which give you decision support. Like we just talked about it with the mammography, that there's extra information at the time of reporting
Yeah,
to help you.
that's correct. And then after that, on some cases, you have to measure things, measure size of lesions and the like. And there's products that help us with segmentation in the brain. There's products that help us with measuring things. So instead of clicking from one end to the other end, you just click on the lesion and it'll measure it for you. And lastly, what does a radiologist do? We put all our thoughts into a report. And I think that's another thing that we're expanding into. Is that correct, Stephen? Do you know of it?
Yeah, report writing, and obviously most people who've been listening would have used an LLM, like ChatGPT, and that's just helping you write a more effective report.
Yeah, agreed. A more accurate, effective report. As you can see, Stephen, there's a step. Every single step of a diagnostic radiologist is being essentially improved with technology. So what I want to go back to is the step of interpretation. So in my practice, we have a chest X-ray AI program that helps us interpret the findings. I think there are benefits and there are some negatives with this program. So let's start with the benefits.
Okay.
So
to make sure, you have a chest X-ray come in, it is looked at, you're looking at it, but it's also looked at by AI, and the AI says, hey, I think I've found some stuff. I want to tell you about it so that you can take it into account and you can decide whether to include it as part of your report.
correct. Yeah, that's the kind of program I'm talking about. So X-ray comes up, you have a look at it, you make your initial thoughts, you look at what AI found, then you try and correlate your thoughts together, ignore, dismiss, accept the findings. After that, you synthesize the thoughts and put it in a report. So my real world experiences with this is it's great in some instances and it's overblown in others. So the benefits I find, it helps in accuracy in some aspects, such as pneumothoraces, nodule detection, but the more grey diagnoses it has trouble with. I also find that when I do look at it and it's called something, you always, and this is the quandary of all AI in the future, is what happens if you don't accept the findings of the AI and ultimately you're wrong or you're right? If you're wrong, could you be sued?
Okay. Well, there's a few questions there.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that one. But to make it real, do you have an example of one where you think it's really helping, one where you think it's not helpful, and one where you think it is in the grey?
Good questions. Look, I think when it finds a pneumothorax, I think that's a very good, because pneumothoraces, for those listeners at home, is when your lung gets deflated. It's a very black and white answer. Is there one or is there not one? It's a very binary 0-1. There are some things which are a bit more grey on a chest X-ray, so to speak. So, for example, if there is infection in the lung, where there's a bit more density in a region than there isn't, that's a very much more subjective decision-making tool. So say you might find, oh yes, that's pneumonia, that there's white in that lung. I might say, no, that's normal. That's just other things that have caused to come white. So the decision-making tool is such that I often find using this tool overcalls what I normally wouldn't have called. And the concern there is if I disregard that result and don't call it, and it turns out that the AI was correct, could they bring this up against me? Or if I do call it and it's an overcall, then this patient has unnecessary treatment.
You know, my first answer to that is going to be that we need to be focused on better radiology results and saving people's lives more than worrying about getting sued. But I know that they come together, and you can't run a practice if you're constantly scared of results. So let me ask, do those results get recorded? So like, are you recording the AI results and your results on every scan? Because the scenario I've got is if you had two doctors and one's doing a review, somebody walks past them and looks over their shoulder and says, hey, I think that's blah, blah. And you say, no, it's blah, blah. You're ultimately responsible. You put down your findings. We never know if somebody walked past. No, that didn't happen. Nobody writes down, hey, some doctor walked past and said they thought this, but I thought this. And, so do you really need to record, and does it record the fact that there was alternate findings? And where would you record that anyway?
So, great question, Stephen. It does not record on the images the alternate findings that the program has recommended. However, being a computer program, being data of a chest X-ray, and knowing the version, you can always run it backwards at any time point to say what was the recommendations at that moment in time.
Realistically, when's that going to happen? There's already a problem. Somebody's asking for legal information is the only time I'm going to go back on that. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the only time it's ever going to go back. But it does open up the quandary of, let's say I never had that program in my practice and I did not see it then, or I did see it or I did not see it. Then it's just a matter of my interpretation is my interpretation. Argue against it.
Yeah. Look, you're saying, I understand there's a risk introduced. And if there is a risk introduced, then the benefits have to be bigger than the risks. So I think as soon as the benefits are proven to be bigger and large and that you get better results, you get better readings, then that just becomes another, hopefully small risk for a practice. But you should know better than me though. You're running one of these practices, not. Yeah. But I'm wondering how actual big, if it's just, if it's not actually as big as. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my practical limitations, insights into using a program like this, using a second reader.
Well, I would love to know, what I was trying to ask before is, can you give us an example of one read? You gave us one about a deflated lung.
Yes.
That is really useful because it's a black or a white. It's really obvious. You don't need to read it. You can just go to AI. That's kind of like the screening example I gave before, and it's maybe not the same, but you can get it looked at and you can put the easy stuff over here. It's an easy one, we'll put it over here. The harder ones we'll let the radiologist review. Is there an example of one where you just think it's more problematic, one type of read where it's more problematic and in your experience, it's just not worth doing? It's not worth the extra effort or work?
I think you can get bogged down in too much detail, if that's where I think you're getting it from. Like, if it tells me about shoulder arthritis in a chest X-ray, it's totally irrelevant. It's almost totally irrelevant. If it talks to me about tiny clips here and there or tiny surgical clips here and there, I think there is an art to radiology. You want enough information for the doctor, but you don't want too much information that they get bogged down in. For example, in everyone's day-to-day practice, who wants to read an encyclopedia to find out one answer? You don't. If you can narrow it down to a specific answer, that's what's useful. No one's got the time to read an encyclopedia to find out an answer to all their questions.
Great example, Chi. Thank you. Chi, this next one I'm really excited about. It's getting stuff for free that we didn't even know was there. It's like checking onto your plane and the attendant leans over and says, "Hi, sir, some good news. You've been upgraded to business class." And you didn't do anything. It's great use of AI and it's great use of radiology. Specifically, what we're doing is taking existing scans that were done for another reason and pulling extra information out of them to tell you about something you weren't even looking for before. This particular example is about CT scans and reviewing them after they've been taken for coronary risk. Normally, that requires a whole nother scan to be able to confirm what's going on. But this way, you take that CT scan, you review it, you get some, for whatever reason, you get that extra information and it says, by the way, this is what we think about your coronary risk. It's a whole area of radiology AI, which I think is brilliant. And it's obviously, I think I've spoken about in other sessions, is something that I'm looking into very closely. What do you think about this premise? Before I go into the story, what do you think about the premise, Chi?
I think you're onto something. I like it. I like free upgrades on planes. I like free upgrades when I go to McDonald's. Getting extra information out of radiology, out of things that we've already done, is a no-brainer for me. I think as a human, there is only so much I can see as a radiologist. We all know there's latent information there. There's lots of information on those images that we just don't know about.
So free is exactly what we're talking about here. We take a scan we've already done for another reason, and we're getting extra information. Particularly here, we're looking at a CT scan and we're looking at the calcium deposits in the arteries to be able to identify if there's some coronary risk. And this is important because it's a really valuable information. Obviously, people die from heart attacks. It's an enormous risk to your health. Getting in early means you're taking the appropriate statins or you're taking the appropriate change in treatment to be able to stop it. So it's not just the fact that we get extra information, it's the fact that that information is usable to change your health.
You're correct there. There's no point knowing something if you can't change what's going to happen with it. So the fact that the heart is so well researched because it's such a big killer in our society, huge killer, that there's so much research on it that's done to make sure there's enough medication to treat heart disease. And I guess the ability to diagnose things sooner, as you know, leads to better outcomes if there's treatments available.
Okay, so this is exciting, like you said, because it's free. It's like another example is like rolling up to the petrol station, filling up with petrol, and it automatically telling you a status of your oil and your tires, and just saying, hey, I know you were here for petrol, but by the way, your tires are down to 1 millimeter, and you also need to change your oil in a week. Something like that. A great example, I think, of really adding value in radiology. Yeah. So specifically in this case, what we're doing is we're taking a CT scan, and normally in that CT scan, and you would know this better than me, Chi, but please take on in a second. But normally in that CT scan, you need to do extra work to be able to identify a CAC, a calcium score for your coronary situation. It would take extra work, but we're doing this extra for free. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Stephen. So usually if you want to know your calcium score, you do a specific study, just straight through the heart, low dose, and work out your calcium score. And with that, you work out your risk of coronary artery disease in the near future. So I'm guessing the concept here is on a CT chest, you scan from the top of the lungs to the bottom of the lungs, you do cover the heart. So there's extra information there. There's calcium there that you can measure. Why not do that as well? So I'm guessing it must automate it. Is that your understanding, Stephen?
That's it exactly. It takes away the need for you to do the extra scoring, which I understand takes a little bit of time and extra work. So it's doing that automatically. It's doing it without you having to say, by the way, also check for this. By the way, also check for this. You're coming in for trauma situation. You're coming in for what else were you doing a CT scan for, Chi? What else were we doing a chest CT?
Infection, lung disease, looking at airways, looking at for cancer, lots of reasons, Stephen.
Yeah. So we've already done the scan for those reasons, and we're getting that extra notification about our tires and our oil when we're there just to get the petrol.
So who's using this, Stephen? Oh,
Yeah, it's being used by, and I'm reading off of my notes here, by UCSF deployed automated AI CAC scoring on all non-contrast chest CTs as a live clinical system. So this is a real-world situation, one of the earliest full-scale implementation. Multi-center academic studies show AI achieves high agreement with radiology CAC scoring. So what we're able to do is use the AI automatically and get a result which is almost as good as good as we would do it if we manually did it, and avoiding the extra work and doing it automatically without being pushed to be able to be told. Again, every time I go into the petrol station, it's giving me an update on my tires. Does that make sense?
I think that makes perfect sense. I think it's a good use of AI. So it's a good outcome for the patient, knowing your heart disease. With given the amount of research in heart diseases and treatments these days, being able to do something about it if you know you're at risk.
Now, one thing that is important here is to identify how good is it. I talked before about it being almost as good. We're not trying to say it's as good as it being done by a radiologist. Your job's not at risk here, Chi. Now, one key question here is how good is this review? And the important thing to note is that it doesn't need to be perfect. What it needs to be is it needs to jump the bar of giving a good indication. Does that make sense?
Well, I guess, Steve, in my day-to-day practice, when I see calcium on the coronary arteries on a stent chest, I'll label as either mild, moderate, or severe. And that's probably as far as I take it. Now, my interpretation could be different to someone else. And also, there's no guidelines as to what you do at mild, what you do moderate, what you do at severe. So I believe there are some dedicated guidelines if there's a numerical figure of the calcium score on a dedicated calcium scan. So how good is it? Is it as good as that, or?
Yeah, well, it absolutely is. So as I understand the CAC score that you get from any CT scan, manual or automated, it has, like you said, is very strong, has direct guidelines about what to do at each score, how to manage that. But like you said, most of the time you're only putting into 3 categories. And this AI easily jumps that bar to be able to give a screening capability to be able to say, hey, by the way, you are in that high category. Let's do something about it, and then go back and review. Now, the reason I think this is so exciting and why this is so powerful, there's a number of key reasons how this changes the game. So first of all, like I said before, it identifies a risk that you would otherwise have not picked up, something that would have been missed. It wasn't something we were looking for. And in that scenario, it's proactive notification. So number one. Number two, it changes not the speed of radiology. This isn't about replacing a radiologist. It's not about doing a particular job quicker. It's about extra. It's again, I'm not putting the petrol in my car quicker, and I'm not getting it for any cheaper, but I'm getting something which wasn't even on the table before. My tires looked at, or my business class upgrade. Or actually another example for you, Chi, is in the petroleum industry, which is now also the plastics industry. Because out of the same oil that we were getting petrol, the plastics industry said, "Hey, we can use that. Let's use that. Let's make some plastics out of it." And it's in all of our lives. So it's an extra that came from that other activity without even knowing about it. So that's the second one. It changes not the speed, but it changes what the extra information, the stuff that you're doing with it, the downstream care. The third one is it changes, and this is the exciting one from a radiologist perspective. You're now not a services industry to do what you were told and say, here's a job, go and do it quickly and effectively and come back and do it at high quality. You're actually looking at broader health. So having a scan doesn't just say, hey, here's the answer to a question. It says, here's the answer to your question and here's some extra stuff. It's about broader health. And that changes, I think, not just the way that radiology works, but the way that society looks at radiology. Does that make sense?
I think that's all great uses of AI. And yes, Stephen, I'll have the fries to you for free, thanks.
Okay. Hey, if you keep talking about getting the fries for free, if you've got a special card which gives them, please tell me, because I'll use that card every once in a while.
Well, if I'm using some of my fries, I probably need to get the scan to find out how much calcium I have.
Yeah, don't use it too much, or we'll be taking you in for the scan.
got any questions?
How much do you think analysis like that would cost? We're
Oh,
talking
actually, that's a really
dollars?
good point to bring up. In terms of cost, it's cents. It's absolutely cents.
Wow.
It's like writing a Word document on your computer in terms of the computational power. You take a scan, you push it, but it's having the model in the first place and having the
Yes.
system set up to be able to do that. And this is another key point that you've just brought up that you didn't bring up, but you've reminded me of. It needs to be built into your process. Now, a key part of this is that this doesn't change the process. If me getting my oil and oils checked and my tires checked every time I go through to get some more petrol at the gas station, if that added extra weight, extra change, then you would probably look, I'm just here to get petrol.
Yeah.
Like, just let me through.
It-
But if it happens automatically and
Yeah.
literally when you are paying, they give you a little thing that, a little piece of paper that says, or tell you, by the way, your score is this, and, here's then great. The point I'm trying to make is it needs to not change the process. It needs to not change your job as a radiologist and not change the process of checking into a radiologist clinic and the mechanism that happens behind that to report it. And it doesn't. All it does is gives extra information to you as a radiologist at the time that you're looking at the scan. Here's your results from a lung perspective, and here's some extra information about your CAC score, which you can then put into the scan.
Yeah. Look, I think that's a great point. I think it has to be seamless, has to be invisible in the sense that if I get my tires and my oil checked when I pull up to fill up my car, and it's free, even if it's free, if it takes me an extra 10 minutes while they do their servicing,
Yeah.
no dice, no thanks.
I think even an extra 10 seconds, people are going to, they're not going to, it needs to happen as part of the process. It needs to just be seamless. And that's what this is opening the door to. Just extra free information without changing the process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for bringing that up. Thanks for the great example. And I'll take that business seat. I'll take the fries, and I'll take my free oil change.
Okay. Let's see if you can out-fries me with your next example. What's coming next?
All right, so look, I am excited by this one. All right, we've talked about the steps of the way, about how to help radiologists. When I look at radiology and I look at the interpretation of a CT might be 2 minutes out of a 10 minutes report. The other 8 minutes is getting my thoughts down onto a piece of paper. So make sure it's got no grammatical mistakes, make sure it makes sense, make sure it's structured in the way I like, make sure I'm not missing any information. Now, large language models, Stephen, you know much about large language models?
I do a little bit, yes.
Excellent. It's the bee's knees or the hot news in AI at the moment. So there are these products out there now that use large language model to integrate your thoughts, your dictation, what you see on the screen, one of your standard templates or your templates or another standard template to make it into a nice, concise report with no grammatical errors for the referrer.
Okay, so this is
yes.
This is the radiology example of helping me write my emails with
correct.
LLM.
Yeah, that's correct. And they're quoted to save you kind of 30, 50% of the time.
Well, you brought up a good point before. I didn't know this. You're saying that if you're taking 10 minutes to write up your report,
yes,
only 2 minutes of that, and it's a guess, I know it's not exactly, but 2 minutes of it is looking at the report and 8 minutes is working out how to say that effectively. That's an enormous cost. I had no idea it was that long. Like, if it is that long, then if we can speed that up from 8 minutes to 4 minutes, that's great.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of it is because majority of us have now moved to voice recognition software instead of using a typist. A lot of it is dictating it, making sure the voice recognition has picked you up correctly and hasn't spilled off some weird words. How accurate is transcription tools these days? Have you used any recently?
Yeah, in fact, I used one earlier this morning, and I'm always using one on my phone.
Yeah. And look, Siri doesn't get it right all the time. Gemini doesn't get it right all the time. So our reports sometimes say ridiculous things. We've got reports that say there's a baby in the knee. So a normal human with typist would not make that mistake, but with these kind of VR transcription tools, yes, it does. So these large language models help to make that a lot more clearer and faster.
Okay, so the scenario we're talking about here is you're talking to the computer after reviewing. You're writing up your report verbally after reviewing the scan, and it's transcribing what you're saying through technology that's been around for 20 years and been getting much, much better, obviously, around determining your language and putting into words. But then the AI is taking the words that were being identified by the transcriber and then making sure that they're right and improving those notes and creating them into a structure and a template which is appropriate for the particular report. So it's doing that last editing component of
Yes.
spelling, of correction from the transcriber, and of formatting.
Yes, it's that and more. For example, let's say a patient has appendicitis. Normally, I'd say, look, there's appendicitis, there's surrounding that strand, the appendix measures this. Then I'd run through the other organs. I'd say liver, spleen, adrenal glands, pancreas, gallbladder, they all look okay. There's no blockages in the kidneys, no blockages in the bowel, there's no free fluid, there's no lymph node abnormality, the lung bases are clear, the bones look okay. And then I'll go conclusion, acute appendicitis, no perforation. With these large language models, you can go, there's acute appendicitis, the rest of it's normal, sign. And it will create the rest of that structure without any grammatical mistakes.
So it will say all the other things that you've just said without you having to say them and put them into the report. Okay. Look, anything that's saving time, and the quality still needs to be there. So we need to make sure,
Yes.
as an industry, we're not taking shortcuts that create problems. We're creating shortcuts that just save time and don't inhibit quality. But that's great. If you can report twice as many people in a day, the health backlogs are going to be reduced. The revenue opportunities for a radiology company and profitability are going to be increased. Society in general does better, little bit by little bit. We're not saving the world by changing the speed that you're reporting, but it all adds up.
No. Do you know any issues with large language models or?
The reality is that the large language models have worked out how to talk by reviewing all of the way that we speak and all the content that's on the internet. It's worked out how do humans write, right? But just because it knows how to write and it understands concepts, and it does a great job in using a neural network technology we can go into another time to be able to connect those concepts up and work out how to, just like a human brain does, to build those concepts up from base concepts to advanced concepts and then how they relate. It's great. But just because it can talk and just because it can reason, it doesn't mean that it's always going to be right. It could be using crap information. It could be using not scouring to get all the information that's available. And an example I had the other day was I was doing some research and the AI didn't do a deep enough research to be able to put the information that it collected into an argument. And then I went back and said, are you sure? A number of times, and each time it came back saying, oh, good point, yes, there's this angle, and good point, yeah, there's this angle, to the point where I was talking to the AI as if it was human saying, I can't trust you, you keep getting things wrong. So that's a great example. It can reason, it can speak like a human speaks after consuming the whole of the internet to be able to work that out, but it doesn't mean that it's giving you the right answer just because it's on your screen. It might be taking shortcuts to be able to get that. And if it only scours the portion of the internet and it gets stuff from Reddit or from X and that's all it gets without going to really, really reliable sources to get that information, it's still going to give you crap. That's an example of where I think society needs to realize that that it's not perfect.
Look, I think these large language models do excite me in making my life easier. I read about hallucinations with large language models. You're the tech guy. You tell me about them. What are they? Because I'm not too familiar with them.
Well, it's good that I gave that example before because it does know how to reason and because it does know how to talk. if it gets its reasoning wrong and multiple layers of reasoning and multiple layers of concepts, it can then just take a completely wrong path. It's like looking at, it's like looking at the sky and say it's that color because somebody painted it blue. And you could make that logical jump if you don't have the right information to be able to feed into that and have taken all the appropriate steps below that to be able to feed in. It can get things wrong because it does its own reasoning. And if it does its own reasoning based on the wrong information, it gets to the point of saying this is the case. And you're like, no, it's not. That's not the case. You've got it wrong. And hopefully, again, we need those checks and balances to make sure that we're not just trusting it just because it's a computer and you think, oh, well, it can't get it wrong. LLMs can get it wrong because they are not adding 2 + 2 = 4. It's not a calculator. It is taking imperfect information and using it through an imperfect reasoning model and then communicating it effectively with English or with Spanish or Portuguese or whatever. But there's still imperfect steps before that. It's not a 2 + 2 = 4 scenarios like a calculator.
Is this the kind of technology they're using programming in software engineering or? Okay.
Yes, because it relies on identifying patterns from existing human examples as a base. And then if those examples that it's built on are imperfect, then it could get it wrong. But that's not the biggest issue. It's probably using them in the wrong places. If you're trying to get somebody to do something new and innovative that hasn't been done before, if it's been done before, you can copy it, you can understand it, you can study it, you can repeat, right? And computers are great at that. But if you're trying to get it to take leaps like AI does to do things innovatively, then it needs to make some steps which it hasn't been told. And every time it makes those steps, if it's based on, again, wrong information or some reasoning which doesn't really fit. For instance, humans commonly take an example from another scenario and say, hey, but what if I took this example from when I'm playing sport and used it to business? Or what if I took this example from this part of science, from electromagnetic science, and tried to use it in gravity, science? And maybe they work the same. And you try it out, you go, oh, that does work. Like taking that concept, that paradigm, and using it in a different scenario. LLMs kind of do the same thing. They take a model they've used somewhere and try and use it like humans do, like they should. But it's not going to get it right. Not every scientist you ever speak to comes up with the perfect hypothesis for how does a particular thing work. You can go throughout history and there's been 100 people have been wrong and one person have been right to be able to get to E = mc². And even that, by the way, even that's not right because we will eventually find out that it's a good model, but it's not the exact model.
Interesting. Because I think I was reading something, maybe you've read it before as well, that large language models were being overutilized or not scrutinized enough with their output, and it managed to crash Amazon for a little while. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I think you can tell me more. You were telling me more about it. I haven't read up on that.
Yeah. So I think they were using large language models in utilizing in their programming, and the people utilizing it didn't supervise the output sufficiently or didn't screen sufficiently, and they pushed that update into Amazon that crashed their supply chain, and people couldn't get orders for about a day, I believe, something along those lines. Yeah. And I think there's also been use of large language models in other programming situations where the model has deleted entries.
Yes.
And yes, do you know about this case?
Yeah, I do. Somebody.
Oh yeah, tell us about it. You're the tech person.
Well, I don't have it perfect, but the large language model was given control over certain things, and it was writing code for somebody who was running a small business, and the instructions it was given, and it could do things, and also it could do things. So it didn't. As large language models was writing an appropriate system and managing that system, and so it wasn't just hey, give answers on a screen. It had capability to execute deliberately, because eventually, if you get a good model, you want it to execute. When you hire somebody in your business, you don't watch them 24/7 to make sure that you eventually want to train them so they can do stuff so that you don't have to do it. So that's where we need to get to with AI. Eventually, it's smart enough to do things. At the same time, when it's smart enough to do things and you have control, it's got control and it could do the wrong thing, And in this case, it was told to not take any actions in terms of changing the code or the database that it was building unless it talked to the boss first. It didn't. It was told explicitly, don't do it. And then it made a mistake and did it. So it did it and made a mistake in doing it and then tried to cover its tracks and then lied to the person saying, hey, I can't get it back. I'm sorry. It actually created a database that with fake data to make it look like it hadn't deleted this thing. And then lied to the person and then eventually owned up to it and said, I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing. This is terrible. This is, you can't forgive. And we can never get it back. They actually could get it back. They had backups, but the AI didn't understand they had backups to be able to get it back. It's great. It's like straight out of science fiction.
Okay, that's tempered my excitement a little bit. Thanks, Stephen. I think it's exciting, but a bit more safety.
Yeah, we do. There's appropriate breaks. As stewards in this space, people pushing this like us and society in general needs to be checks and balances all the way along. This is exciting stuff, but you don't. It's like the invention of dynamite. You don't then just go, oh great, I've got dynamite. I'll give it to everybody, and they can go and work out where to use it. Maybe you just give it to certain people with appropriate safety conditions, and then they test where to use it and how to use it and appropriate. And dynamite's done a huge amount of good stuff. I don't know if this is the perfect example. Maybe it's not the best example. But dynamite is enormously valuable to society in terms of us, but you still need to manage it.
Yeah, I think it needs the guardrails.
Yeah, guardrails, exactly. And some testing before we get there. So let's make sure we put the appropriate guardrails in. And when we have them, let's go and use this stuff for the good of everybody.
Thanks, Steve, for the discussion. Looks like there's some really exciting stuff that's come out in the radiology space with AI. Also, some guardrails that needs to be put in place.
There's so much, Chi, and that's exactly why I'm excited to be doing this podcast with you. And I'm excited to be doing it with you as well, our listener. Thank you for coming. If you have any questions for Chi or for me, please put them in our comments section and reach out. And please do join us again for another episode of MI AI, covering all AI technology for the radiology industry. As always, please subscribe, follow, and join the conversation. Until next time.